I do wonder about your prospects for the whole of 2023, especially if we get to see a stronger dollar given all of this global central bank tightening in a dollarized economy like yours.
Right. Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to be here today, and let me wish you a happy new year. Let me start mentioning that in 2021, the Korean economy grew by 4.2%, exceeding all previous forecasts, although in 2022 forecast was reduced from 2.8% to 2.7% due to strikes that took place in June. Ecuador's GDP grew by 3.2% in the third quarter of 2022 compared to the same period of 2021, reflecting a recovery in economic activities. It is also important to highlight that the household consumption reached a historical high of $11.8 billion in real terms, making it a fundamental component for a sustained recovery for the Ecuadorian economy, as it represents more than 65% of our GDP. From the central bank perspective, we think these results indicate that the Ecuadorian economy is returning to its growth path, generating a positive expectation for the fourth quarter of 2022 and exceeding the most recent annual forecast of 2.7% for 2022. Therefore, we are expecting that Ecuador's economic growth for 2022 will exceed 3%.
What about 2023, though? Because that's the key concern, right? Like last time, you called a 3.1% growth. So does that mean that you'll be revising that higher given how much better you're performing? And as I mentioned earlier, what about the stronger dollar?
Right. Well, so far we are planning to maintain the 3.1%. We have been following, the international situation that might affect Ecuador. We are analyzing the impact of a stronger dollar. We are also following very closely the real exchange rate. And so far, the benefit is that Ecuador has a low inflation compared to other countries in the region. Ecuador's inflation remain controlled mainly by our dollarized economy and partly for subsidies on gas prices. In addition, the government approved an important tariff reform for roughly 700 imported goods in 2021, and it also improved how tariffs are estimated in Ecuador. These two relevant reforms also contribute to reduce inflationary pressures in our country. Thus, Ecuador's inflation for November 2022 reached 3.6%, which is significantly lower compared to other countries in the region.
What expectations of benefits do you have from this recently concluded FTA with China?
Okay, so exports show an increase of 25% between January and October of 2022 compared to 2021. Non-oil export grew by 22% due to an increase in external sales of products such as shrimp and mining products. There are other important industries such as banana, cocoa, tuna, fish, coffee products that will benefit from this trade agreement with China. So this will reduce the dependency on oil exports and promote non-oil exports that are essential for economic growth of Ecuador. So it's great news. President Lasso also communicated this past week that they also completed the negotiation with Costa Rica regarding the free trade agreement, which is also another important trading partner for Ecuador. So it's a step in the right direction for Ecuador's trade.
So, Guillermo, we had high expectations for Ecuador in the beginning of last year with a recovery, but then we had the protests in June, and now we are seeing bond slumping again. With this anxiety with higher global rates, how do you expect that to play into financial markets and eventually filter through the Ecuadorian economy? And what is your outlook on that space?
Right. Nowadays, Ecuador's risk premium does not reflect the significant progress of key macroeconomic indicators. The current level is a result of the uncertainty generated by different views between the presidency and the Congress, as well as the strikes that took place, as you mentioned, in June related to fuel subsidies. So, in fact, according to debt sustainability analysis, there is a very high probability that the debt to GDP ratio will decrease for instance, in the following years. More importantly, the current administration, as President Lasso and the Minister of Economy and Finance has mentioned in several times, this administration understands the relevance of having solid public finances, ensuring macroeconomic stability, and having access to international markets and multilateral institutions in good financing conditions.
So important, especially after the 2020 external debt restructuring, right? What was the takeaway from that experience, and what other new credit lines are you looking at?
The Central Bank of Ecuador is a custodian of dollarization. After the Congress passed the law in defense of dollarization in May 2021, the Central Bank of Ecuador is a fiscal agent and depositary agent of public resources. It ensures the availability of cash nationwide, as well as manage the central bank payment system and the country's international reserves. So the Central Bank of Ecuador is responsible for protecting and strengthening this monetary system. Therefore, the central bank has ensured access to liquidity facilities with recognized financial institutions. For instance, the Bank for International Settlement, the BIS, doubled the contingent line for the Central Bank of Ecuador from $420 million to $840 million. Also, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York recently granted us a FEMA repo facility for $1 billion for exclusive central banking operations in periods of liquidity shortages. So, in the past year, the Central Bank of Ecuador has restored its institutional strength and laid the foundations to consolidate monetary stability while guaranteeing its autonomy with the support of multilateral organizations such as the IMF, the IDB,